Cool. Hello, everybody. Welcome to an EA Zoom meeting presented by myself, SΥmონ. I'm excited today because I'm talking about the water trinity, and in particular how evolutionary astrology comes to understand evolution, and in particular how we as human beings relate to our evolution ourselves through the emotions. There's lots of information that I want to share with you today, so I hope that it inspires you to take a look at this dynamic within not only your own work, but also within your own life, and how the process of metamorphosis and purification and how the ego actually supports that process. So how this evolution is actually working through us. So what else is there that I wanted to share? No, that's about it. Okay, so I've got some slides that I want to jump straight into for everybody. And let's hope and see if I can actually get some Q&A afterwards. So if you have questions for me or anything that you would like to ask me regarding the subject, if I do get to a point where there is a space to ask those questions, it would be super interesting and fun to actually engage with you with them. So yeah. So if you got any during the time, remember them, write them down, etc. Okay, cool. So this presentation actually on some has different levels to it. Some of us might be very familiar with the water trine and understanding what these are about and how the emotional body works. So I'm sorry, or I do apologize for it being very simple in its explanation. But I figured that for most of us that are learning about evolutionary astrology and are intrigued by how this plays out, this is a really great way to not only remind us, but also to teach us about this, what I consider to be a really important aspect. Okay. So just a quick check. Can everybody see the screen at the moment? It's super clear?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Let me get my annotations. Okay, so once again, welcome to the EA Zoom meeting, the water trine, evolution through the emotional body. And this is a meeting held on the 7th of December, 2017. Okay, so I find it really fascinating to come across this material and also to connect with it, because I'm one of those souls that from early life as well as prior lives spent a great deal of time using the patriarchal masculine principle of the quest for spiritual knowledge, and to access the unity consciousness through deep states of meditation and all of these types of wonderful techniques that the masculine principle has used, particularly over the last maybe 2,000 years. We've been going back even further in how to actually access enlightenment. And part of this process is developing a very strong relationship to looking outside of ourselves and seek the answers for our lives through these belief systems, these different cosmologies, okay? And one particular story that I find really fascinating about my own chart and why this material is so profound to me was that when my dad passed away at around about the age of 21, I took the route of a spiritual bypass. Fair enough, at that stage I wasn't really aware or emotionally mature to even understand what was occurring, but I still consider it to be a spiritual bypass, because I had been exposed to quite a lot of esoteric teachings from the age of 12 onwards, and also studied astrology at that age as well. And so I had a lot of what I classify as old paradigm spiritual teachers that were very much rooted in the masculine principle of these, again, looking outside of ourselves for the answers to life, and then using the spiritual overlay as a way of justifying reality and our experiences, and obviously forgetting about what the emotional connection is all about. And so because of this being the case, and because of me not really having anybody around me that could, ironically, and I say that in huge quotation marks, all of these esoteric teachers that were around me giving me all these beautiful insights around the nature of existence didn't have the capacity to help me nourish the deep layers of emotional complexity that were occurring within my life at that stage. And so obviously I naturally, disassociated through various forms of, drugs and stuff, and also, getting invested into like computers and how that worked, and distracted myself from that. But I would always be reminded of the emotional pain that would be existing with me, but I'd never be able to process it. I didn't understand what it was. So because of this being the case, I have Jupiter, Uranus, South Node, Neptune, all in Sag, all in the 11th house. So I naturally would use the spiritual overlay to justify why the experiences had occurred, including the statement that I remember very clearly, which was at his funeral, talking to somebody, was saying, at the end of the day, it's really, really sad that he had to leave, but if he had been here any longer, he would have changed the timelines of everybody's lives. And yeah, that sounds really, really amazing, but behind the scenes there was that disconnect, that Aquarius 11th house stuff. So up until my obviously up until my Saturn return, and my Saturn sits in the 10th house Scorpio, conjunct my sun sign. And of course, this whole entire process of emotional maturity is going to come through accessing the emotional body. So I spent my Saturn return going through an experience where I attracted a lot of people, including an 8th house Pluto with the Scorpio moon in the 9th house, with Virgo Pisces axis, with Neptune square the nodes, etc. Really, really bringing me to a level of realization that type of cosmology or overlay in terms of how I understood the phenomena of reality and interacted with human behavior and human beings did not work, and that there was a lack of emotion there completely. Of course, Pluto in the 10th house as well, natally, I would naturally have a lot of emotional suppression. And I had these dreams to do the work that you see me doing right now, but I never had that stage of development that was necessary for me to really connect empathetically to everybody that I was talking to, and also how I was actually going to materialize my dreams through the emotional body. So anyway, my Saturn return brought me to realizing this dynamic and how I needed to really go through all the different stages of emotional development that were very, 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 very stunted, including parts of myself and my emotional psychology that was still in its like 6-year-old stage. I don't know if anybody really understands what I mean by that, but really accessing the layers that were shut down when mom and dad didn't give us something or whatever of the sort. So going through all of those layers and then coming across evolutionary astrology. And it was funny because I really seeked a form of astrology, like I said, since the age of 16, where I was able to understand what this was about. I wanted to find the core. I wanted to find a form of astrology that really brought the essence of what this was really about. And to me, EA came into my life on my Saturn return. And I started reading all this Jeffrey material, and he talked a lot about the water trine, and obviously the message board had loads of material in it. And I became aware very, very quickly that this is what was actually occurring in my life. It was like, in order for me to really activate not only the resolutions of my skip steps, but to access the Saturn work and how to really bring that stuff into the world, and for me to really truly live my North Node, I would need to really grasp the concept of emotional body. And it was only up until 2015 at the end, actually it was 2016, when I had a 4th house solar return transit with Pluto, of course, and the abandonment of my mother. My mother I brought her over here, but there was a lot of like emotional stuff that came up because of the transit. she then left, and that brought up all of this material. And I was like, whoa, hold on. This is really, really amazing. Even though it is uncomfortable, I was really aware of this dynamic that was making me feel for the first time in a way that I was actually addicted to. I was addicted to the ability to feel, which was a very profound thing because I had fragments of it, but I wasn't able to truly access the layer of feeling that I really wanted to have regarding reading the Pluto 10th house stuff. And so the work within the emotional body and the clearing out and the understanding of the different layers and working with that has brought me to such a profound place within my own life that, to me, I've almost gone into this classic Sagittarius fanatical behavior where I felt this really strong importance to have a message, Pluto conjunct Mercury in the 10th house, that is linked with healing the emotional body and recognizing the importance and how it's linked with disease and how it's linked with the nourishment of the cells and how the cells themselves are reflections of all of the emotional toxicity, as well as the crystallization of emotion and how we experienced impressions when we're interacting with reality. And all of this really, really bringing me to a place of going, you know, and again, like I said, reading the water trine and reading up and on what it means to truly evolve through the emotional body. Evolution can only truly occur when this is actually activated completely and you're feeling your way through life. And this is what I consider to be, and I'm sure other people as well will agree, that this is the process of getting into the spiritual state within the stages of awareness that Jeffrey talks about, because you begin to, I mean, I had a very strong sense of empathy and emotional connection. Go figure. I had Mars Pluto in a balsamic phase relationship in the 8th house. Pardon me, not Mars Pluto, Mars Venus. And also I have Neptune opposed the moon in a direct opposition as well. So, and of course, everything in the 10th house. So there's a lot of like emotional capacity that exists within myself. I just need to unlock it. And so what has actually transpired for me, I don't know if you guys have really been following the most recent new phase relationship between Mars and Venus that occurred in October, like the beginning of October. Well, mine actually landed, my Mars and Venus conjunction, new phase conjunction, landed 3 degrees off my skip steps, which is my Mars and Venus balsamic phase conjunction. Literally, it new phase 3 degrees ahead of it. So instead of it wasn't on 16, it was on 19. And what has actually transpired for me since that new phase conjunction, as it's now moved over to my 10th house and Mars in the 9th, was coming into a specific process of eating foods that are linked with a belief system and a cosmology that honors the nourishment of the emotional body, okay? I.e. just completely eating raw foods that are linked with fruit and fruit-based food up until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then even considering not even eating a cooked meal. And there's an intention behind this, and I'll share what this means, because it's got to do with the way in which the fruit itself is a feminine principle of nurture and regeneration. And Jupiter in Scorpio is the process of regeneration. So the lymphatic system, which is linked with the moon, Neptune, and Pluto, drains naturally when we're eating detoxifying foods, which is a Neptune property. So this actual meeting was inspired by the realization of not only how I was feeling as I began to integrate this journey into my life on a more consistent basis, but also how the most recent unfortunate events in my life through extension have brought me to the realization of, again, that things like cancer, for instance, not the archetype, but the actual sickness itself is linked with a lot of the toxicity that we as human beings have within our collective and individual feminine vehicle, which is the body. And if we don't begin to nurture this over here, there's no point in even beginning to learn about astrology or any of the fun things that we like to experience here, because the physical vehicle itself needs to be nurtured. And that on one level is part of what the evolving through the emotional body is about as well. It's not just about the experience that changes it. So with that huge rant and huge explanation of interaction, I sincerely hope that I've kind of captured the depth of what has not only motivated me, but also brought me to this point here today. Okay, so the emotional body in the water trine contains 3 archetypes. As you can see, the Pisces archetype, the Cancer archetype, and the Scorpio archetype. I highly encourage everybody to go read Pluto, as well as any literature on the internet that is EA based that talks about these archetypes so that you can really understand them at a core. But I will obviously bring in some of the stuff in today's conversation. This is for the new people. Okay, so the signs that actually make up the water trine, as you can see in the natural zodiac here, Pisces, 12th house, and Neptune. These are the archetypes. There is the 8th house, Scorpio, and again, the Cancer archetype. Now, again, for everybody that is listening to this for the first time in terms of learning about this, hold this image in your mind's eye, because you will hear me reference it when I talk about the trine from Scorpio to Neptune, or Pisces, and Pisces' trine to Cancer, and of course Cancer's trine to Scorpio, and how this trine, these trines themselves create not only the water trinity, but also the specific language that I'm going to be expressing in the truths that arrive through realizing these connections. So when I say trine, I mean 120-degree aspect between those symbols over there, like that. Okay, right. So that would be the trine. I could use the straight ruler, but I've got the pen out. Okay, so that's what the house system looks like when you're looking at the water trinity. And those are the signs, of course, Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio. Okay, so we're going to start out with Pisces. And again, for the conversation that I want to have, I'm just going to quickly run through some words that I'm going to use through in the conversation. So purity and innocence. The Pisces archetype is linked with the nature of purity and innocence, and in particular, because it is 360 degrees of complete openness. It is the ocean. It is total receptivity. And so through total receptivity, the nature of innocence is available to us. And that's why when you hear me talk about vulnerability linked with Scorpio, then you can see the natural trine that is occurring between Pisces and Scorpio. It's innocence. It's the ability to be so completely open. And then the archetype of death and rebirth connecting to creates that vulnerability. So innocence is linked with Pisces. It's this natural part of us that when we're all naturally innocent. And part of the trauma that we carry within our ego development and our emotional development is because of the innocence that we have. And I know for my own life itself that I'm probably one of the most, I wouldn't say gullible, but I would say the most trusting. And I have a lot of, and I quote this in a very sort of non-New Age way, angels around me, where whenever life has become very, very, when I've attracted certain people that have had dark intentions, people have showed up in my life where they've pointed out and say, hey, that guy's not really good for you, because I'm naturally very innocent in my process, moon opposed Neptune. And it's because I generally see the purity in everybody. There's a part of me that truly knows that deep down our emotional conditioning, there are layers of us that if we experienced openness and positivity and nurture and care from our parents at a young age, we would develop a more trusting relationship to our lives, and we would seek to connect and develop empathy within our relationships because we feel more trusting. And this is actually linked with the secretion of oxytocin within the brain. And I don't know that if most of you know that the relationship between the baby and the mother that occurs right, from the first seconds that the baby is out into the world, the breast actually releases, well, the milk and the process of drinking milk through the breast actually creates and releases oxytocin, which is what the bonding formula is actually about, that trust development. So most of us in our lives, unfortunately, well, not most of us, I do apologize, a large majority of humanity, especially in patriarchal types of societies where that separation occurs, that natural chemical reaction doesn't actually develop in a way that creates that bonding. That's why a lot of men struggle with their relationship to treating women in ways that are nurturing and empathetic and really understand the bonding mechanism because of their own disconnect that occurred with their own mothers. And that's a whole new topic to discuss, particularly with Neptune and Pisces and Chiron and Pisces and Jupiter and Scorpio, which again is a water trine symbolism. So the immune system as well, Pisces correlates to the immune system not only because it reflects the nature of totality, but it also reflects to us how we are. Again, the immune system is what protects us. And when we have toxicity within our body, and toxicity correlates to Scorpio, and the immune system is at a point where it is unable to flush out or release any germs and other forms of bacteria on ourselves, then obviously the body starts to show us that there are aspects within our immune system that are under stress. And polarity point of Pisces, Virgo, stress. So we're dealing with the acute realization that there needs to be purification or cleansing. This is why you'll notice that when you get a cold, and for most of us, when you get a cold, most people subscribe hot water, right, with lemon and so on and so forth. And you'll even notice in pharmaceutical products, there is lemon med and these types of products. And the reason why they subscribe it is because it's like it clears it up. But nobody ever made the connection that it was actually that the hot water stimulates the lymphatic system, which is directly linked with blockages within the body and where toxins occur, that actually changes the sinuses as well as the process of releasing. So now that we're becoming more holistic with Neptune and Pisces and Chiron and Pisces and the ability to heal, we're realizing that actually, if we keep our lymphatic system cleansed through drinking warm drinks during the morning as the first thing that you wake up so that it flushes out anything, your immune system is staying on top, i.e. it's naturally rinsing out. Pisces, rinsing out. Whenever we clean things, we use water. It's not a coincidence that this natural principle within natural law, with regards to cleaning things, we use hot water. Have you ever tried to clean like your dishes where there's been some food that is stuck over there and you're like, cold water is definitely working? No, it doesn't work. So therefore, why would this principles not apply to the human body as well? There's no differentiation. So that's an interesting concept over there in terms of immune system. And again, terminology that I'll use. Consciousness in human form. Every one of us, I don't know if you have experienced or witnessed, and again, this is going to be very confrontational to a certain degree, and I hope it doesn't bring up too many deep emotions for everybody, but actually I do want that to happen so you can feel the emotional body. If you've had to experience a dead body, and in particular when a body is dead and that there is no form there's no life force that is pulsating through there, it is incredibly still. It is incredibly the consciousness is not there. It's not within the form anymore. You can see that consciousness within the human form is the process has been surrendered to the states, i.e. you get what I mean by this. So, and Jeffrey used the great analogy. I love it so much. But when you understand consciousness as water, Neptune, and you understand Saturn as the framework, well, then the body, Saturn, limitations, and the form and consciousness is what keeps us alive. It's what we are here. And the ability for us to actually grasp all of this stuff is that conscious form. So how conscious are you? Pisces, Neptune, the ultimate meaning, the ability to transcend. Also, while I was doing some research, they talk in the EA glossary, talk about the nature of disillusionment being one of the emotions associated with Pisces. And of course, naturally speaking, Pisces is where spirit and unity exists. So it's where we find ultimate meaning in something, and then we go through the process of realization that that was a projected ultimate meaning onto the experience, just like it is for all of us. And we become disillusioned by this. And I have Mars Venus balsamic phase at literally seconds apart from each other. If there's any person that realizes the disillusionment factor, it's me in my process, that constant disillusioning factor, almost to the point where it creates a psychology of like, should I really interact with anything? Is it real? Or if anybody's got a strong Neptune interaction. And so spirit and unity, you know, Pisces is the return. And again, like I said before, when we're dealing with the process of consciousness in human form, and then when somebody does pass and die, it is the spirit leaving the body, again, consciousness leaving it. And so this is where we come into form, we experience form, and we are relieved from form in that sense. We return back to peace. And of course, disassociation is a huge part of the Neptune archetype. Most of us, and including myself, I spent a great deal of time disassociated from experiences. And one of the experiences that I had was the disillusionment. You know, I come from a very small town in South Africa that's not even on the map. I don't mean it's in the map, but South Africa as a country is not really on the map in terms of its relationship to first world countries. But I had huge dreams. You know, I had really big dreams for myself. And when I realized that what I was potentially able to experience in contrast to those dreams, I had such a huge disillusionment on my Jupiter return and Pluto on my Neptune that I just disassociated and spent almost 6 years just completely disassociated from life and checking out. And checking out is because that emotion is so overwhelming that we can't actually, from my opinion, process it, or that there's anything that's around us to process it. So we basically just sit with that disassociating connection. I'm super worried at the moment because there's only 20 minutes left on this conversation and I have lots to talk about. So I'm just going to go faster. I hope that that's okay. Cancer archetype correlates to the cellular framework. Everybody take your mind's eye and imagine that the body is just a complete and utter makeup of cellular cells, because that's what it is. It's just cells. And imagine that each part of your organ or body, particularly the organs, imagine them as different cell centers that form up a specific mechanism. So when we deal with the heart, for instance, it contains a vibration, but that has to have a physical form to it. So think of the heart energy, i.e. the cellular structure of the heart, as the vibration. And then as it comes into the dense form, it creates an identity, Cancer. And so each part of the body, through its cellular structure and its definition, liver, kidneys, etc., all has that identity which relates to a specific part of our energetic makeup. So if you want to take something that's deep and abstract, like an energetic center, and bring it into something that's more practical in terms of explanation through the mind, you can see this as the different cellular frameworks that we have. So the heart, as I said, hope that sounds clear. Cancer, the archetype, also correlates to our roots, the deepest parts of ourselves that are essentially how our initial impressions are made. So mom and dad would be the natural impressions that are made from birth and we connect to and bond with. And so our roots come from this place, the home that you grew up in, the emotional attachments that are linked with the way that home was. And most of us can identify with that because, of course, at the end of the day, when we are reminiscing, Cancer archetype, along with Capricorn, we are connecting to those aspects of our emotional connection to those things. And when we think about our early home and the smells and the imprints, we are connecting with our roots. That's where we come from. And so therefore, that's our sense of identity, the Cancer archetype. And of course, the womb. You just have to look at your home, for instance. It is no different to the womb that you had when you were in mom's belly for 9 months. The only quote unquote difference really is that this is a little bit larger. There's a lot more practical stuff around you, and that there's tangible. You can actually interact with your developed senses. So Cancer archetype correlates to the womb. It's connected with our sense of identity. It's connected with our roots. And of course, the womb is where all of our organs and everything actually were developed. So the cellular programming and the structures were actually formed while we were in the womb, hence the form that we have, the body. And obviously, naturally speaking, the womb correlates to our security needs because this is where we emotionally nurture ourselves. Okay? All right. So let's go on to the Scorpio archetype. And so I want to use the words over here. Toxins and elimination. Think about Pluto, think about Jupiter and Scorpio right now and its mutual connection to Pluto and Capricorn, and how the nature of Pluto and Capricorn is bringing up all of the emotional layers that are existing within human experience. And think about the nature of Jupiter moving through Scorpio and allowing us to expand and grow and heal ourselves, regenerate, but on the polarity side, also bring in all of and expand and grow all of the toxicity that exists within our collective psyche. So Scorpio correlates to the process of elimination. This is why when we are consuming food, Taurus, it comes through our throat, and then the body naturally goes and extracts, Neptune, all of the stuff and all of the nutrients, and then Pluto correlates to the process of eliminating all of the toxins and waste that exists. And so this process of the emotional body, you see that whatever you put in your body is what you eat. So if you're consistently eating foods that are lacking any nutrients, then basically whatever your body will look like and respond from and operate from is going to be a reflection of what you eat. So like I said in the earlier conversation today, at the earlier time when we were talking, that for me, what really spurred me on to do this was the feeling of how my body was operating when I was just consistently eating a raw food diet, where, like I said, it was just more like bananas in a smoothie with tons and tons of berries that are detoxifying, consistently getting my adrenals to start healing themselves through this process, dealing with an immense amount of vitamin C, so oranges, etc. This type of food, because when you look at a fruit, it is living and it is also cellular structure based. When you look at something that comes out of a microwave, it doesn't have the same cellular structure. It's not alive. So what you're putting in your body is regenerating the body's capacity to feel alive. And when you actually experience the elimination of toxins, what you're actually eliminating is all the stagnant stuff that has accumulated over your life that is embedded within the cellular structure of your body. Right? You get this process here. So Scorpio is the elimination of toxicity, and that you'll see how it connects with the trine and the trinity of purification. So naturally speaking, which doesn't really connect with the toxicity eliminations, but it does, desires. Scorpio correlates to that process of recognizing these desires that we have, that we form attachments to, and the desire nature obviously then merges with it, right? So just as I have a desire to heal my body, I'm naturally osmosing with things that represent and symbolize purification, fruit. You see, And then, of course, naturally speaking as well, karma and DNA and RNA. And again, we're dealing with the genetic makeup of our cellular structure. And this is, again, why this is linked with the water trine, because when you're looking at the immune system and you're looking at the makeup, the totality of the whole entire body, and you're dealing with the Cancer archetype in which it's the cellular structure, naturally Scorpio is the process of how that is either regenerating itself consistently or degenerating or dying. Scorpio is very, very simple. It's black and white. It's either existing or it's not. When something is existing and it has life force through it, you feel empowered, you are experiencing growth. And when you are not, through the process of things that are dead, the body is simply just dying. And I was just recently watching the Pluto schools again, and I remember Jeffrey talking about, and this is again another repeating theme that brought me to this talk, was how we as human beings think that the age of 65, 70 is a natural process for us to get to. Whereas really we can actually live a lot longer than that if we understand the mechanics of how the process of cleaning out the colon and cleaning out the lymphatic system and healing these things and eating foods that are in alignment with the natural feminine principles, our body can last longer because it is a natural process of detoxing and elimination. And we're healing the karma at the same time because our emotional attachments to our realities are influencing our natural DNA. So it's all linked with Scorpio and mutation and transformation or transmutation. I put in the fear of vulnerability only because of the Cancer archetype and its connection to that. And I'll talk about that. Metamorphosis as well. This is the process of actually changing the cellular structure within the body. I don't know if anybody have actually witnessed it consciously metamorphosizing your cellular structure and how this process occurs, it's actually a pretty profound experience. Just do yourself a favor and go on a detox cleanse for a week and feel how your cellular structure differentiates and how your body begins to operate at a level that's different, and cell regeneration occurs, and how when you actually invest emotional clarity and purification into the things that you desire to manifest in your life, then you'll actually watch things metamorphosize around you. Like, for instance, when I started the detox process and intensifying, I started to clear out everything within my home that I didn't feel that was clean. It was a physical thing that was occurring outside of my body, and the mutation and the emotional connection that was linked with the cleansing. That is metamorphosis as well, not just on a cellular structure. Loss and abandonment is linked with the fear of vulnerability and the nature of desire. Okay, so 12 minutes left. This is so bad. I'm so sorry. There's so much to talk about and so little time. So I do apologize for me moving forward. I really hope that everybody is following me here. Okay, so the first thing that I want to put across, and the key here, the emotional body and evolving through the emotional body, what I came to realize when I started to process Pluto, Scorpio archetype, process the emotional content that was linked with the passing of my dad, was that there were pockets of pain and different layers. So first I had to deal with the grief, right? The shock. What did that mean? How did I feel about that process? So as I started to open up these pockets of emotion that were covered with spiritual overlays, I started to really feel the pain that was linked with it. So how did I really identify with the experience? So the process of identification is the Cancer archetype. The process of actually processing and going deep within Scorpio to the core of the emotion is the trine between Scorpio and Cancer. Okay, and so what we're dealing with here is, how do we access the layers? So let me draw it here. How do we access the layers of emotion, and how do we personally identify with those emotions that have been experienced through things like, in my case, in this example, through loss? It doesn't have to be through loss. It can be through being accepted to receive an award for work that you've done, that you've researched and found meaning and passion in, and this is a life long achievements that you've had. How do you identify with those ecstatic emotions versus some of the more deeper emotions that are linked with a loss on the other side of the spectrum? So it doesn't have to be just exclusive to loss. It's on all sides, and how we emotionally integrate with this. So the natural trine that takes place between Cancer and Scorpio is, how do we emotionally identify with the core desire? How do we identify with the experience at its most intense level? How do we investigate that? How do we ask the questions why? Because when you see the ongoing relationship between the Cancer archetype and its connection to Scorpio and Scorpio's connection to Cancer, we begin to develop the layers of emotion that link us with the opening of the heart, okay? The capacity to actually open up the heart and realize that the more that we access these layers of emotion and they return us, this is such an important key. They return us, our emotions return us to source. Why? Because look at what's happening on the other side of the Scorpio archetype and the Cancer archetype. It's Neptune. And remember how I talked about Pisces as the archetype of unity. So we come into the world and we separate. And as we separate from the womb, we realize that there's a journey to remembrance. What are we remembering? Mercury retrograde moment. What are we remembering? We're remembering the reason for the separation. And why did the separation occur? Because of the desire that is rooted in Scorpio. So when we actually begin to access the core of our desires or our experiences, and we understand we connect with the emotions that are linked with those desires, we actually begin to get closer to the realization and remembrance function that ultimately leads us to not only answering these deeper questions in life, but also opening us up to higher levels of awareness. And that process in itself deepens our relationship not only to spirit, Neptune, Pisces, 12th house, but also our capacity to enhance, nurture, and cultivate the gifts that are within the Pisces archetype, which is empathy, which is compassion, which is realization, which is the return, i.e. to allow ourselves to really ultimately dissolve the barriers that are in the Capricorn archetype that separate us from that unified understanding. And again, this is not a Neptune, what's the word I'm looking for? New age concept of everything is one and we should just like forgive each other, because that's horrible, horrible, horrible thing to do, because that's just disassociation. Because if you're just forgiving anybody, like for instance, oh yeah, it's okay. When it comes to the mother deciding to act in a way that was really, really childish and knew that she was hurting her son, that she would turn around at some point and go, you know what, hey, I realized that my actions weren't that great. I realized that that was not from a space of clear thinking. That's when you can open up acknowledgement, Capricorn, and then Pisces comes in and says, okay, let's work on empathy and bonding and allowing us to break down the barriers. But if we're not doing that, we're bypassing it. And spiritual bypass is a natural function of this archetype. And I don't want to get into it right now because there's still a thread going on and I'm aware of the time, but this is probably the most important part of this whole entire conversation today, which was that when we're dealing with this process of emotional connection to the Scorpio archetype through the healing function that is Neptune, the purification function, we're actually also learning how to emotionally bond together. And again, bonding with each other is such an important part of the human behavior mechanism, because not only do we have a limbic system that has functions that require us to feel connected, feel Cancer archetype and its connection to Saturn. How can we feel each other? And when we're feeling each other in that sense, we're not only able to actually understand the essence of where somebody's coming, we're also actually transcending the definitions and limitations held within the mind. And we're able to actually feel the, again, like I said, the essence, but more where the person is coming from, so that we can then engage in a way that is able to really access what the essence of the conversation is about and what the interaction is about. And so therefore opening up deeper layers of human bonding. And again, this happens through the process of releasing oxytocin, Pisces, through the experience of safety, Cancer, that is linked with the process of trust. And again, if we have a lot of trust issues through fears of vulnerability that have been linked with, like stagnant or broken bonding mechanisms that have occurred through childhood, through unfortunate experiences, then obviously the way that we heal ourselves through these fear of vulnerability, fear trusting mechanisms, is to really access where the security patterns within your early development were stunted, and therefore to begin working on that through actually developing a relationship with somebody that you can really feel comfortable opening up to, that has a level of vulnerability that they can respect within yourself, so that when you do actually begin to reparent, and maybe this is a conversation for our next lecture, continuation of the water trine, but how we begin to reparent ourselves. And reparenting is probably one of the most important things that you can do on your healing journey, because when you begin to look at your emotional stunted self at the age of 6 or 7 years old from your compassionate adult self that is not linked with the outside parents that were there, you can actually open up and allow a warm hug to that conversation and say, hey, it's okay. It's okay that sometimes we get things wrong, or sometimes we break stuff. It's not the end of the world. We learn from these mistakes. Do you know that when you actually begin to have that dialogue with yourself, you not only reprogram the neuroplasticity within your brain, but you also transmute, transcend, and transform the natural dendrites within your brain structure. And you release oxytocin, which then restructures the hippocampus's memory and initial imprint within the limbic system, so that when you are actually interacting with another experience in your outside world and you respond to it from this newly healing, developing stage, you notice that your triggers become less, because now you're not actually interacting from a space in which these dynamics are occurring where the hippocampus is still very, very aware of this early life trauma. So when you're really getting accessing true healing, it doesn't come from, and I know this is going to sound super confrontational, and I'm going to put my foot in my mouth over here, but from my point of view, masculine principle forms of trying to exit the body, which Jeffrey was talking about, Neptune, let's get out of the body, let's go back to star system 4XYZ and go to our home over there, because that's where we belong. We're trying to ascend out of Earth. That is a complete and utter spiritual bypass, because the more that you come into the body, the more pain you actually endure in terms of realization, the greater your capacity to create beauty. And the more that men particularly can realize this function, the greater their capacity to actually realize that it's not about success through material gains and the muscle form, but it's more about the capacity to nurture ideas and cultivate love in a way that not only grows and creates beauty in the world, that it reconnects us with the feminine, which is the capacity to look outside the world and say, you know what, I don't want to leave Earth. When you get to that place, when you actually get to that point within yourself and you go, there's so much beauty and wonder to see that I don't have enough time, then you know you've reached the point of realization that that is where we've ultimately come to experience, not the desire to leave. And that is a very confrontational thing. And I realize that, but it's the truth from my point of view. And I have a lot of sad stuff. And when you can be mesmerized by that feeling, you can actually truly sometimes even just sit and look at the architecture of a mountain range and cry, because you realize that it's not a mountain range. You realize that that can be reflected through the different evolutionary states of how wind created crevices and how elements were interacting with other, and how sometimes we can go through life that are rocky and challenging, and that a mountain can reflect to us, Mother Nature can reflect to us these aspects, and that a human experience is not exclusive to just the inner internal psyche, but it's reflected outwardly. You know, you can see trees that are just aligned together like that are all blooming during the summer, and how life force is moving through that. Think about the synchronicity that occurs through that process. You know, how do we connect with that? How do we allow ourselves to have experiences in our lives open us up to deeper, deeper layers of emotional connection, so that the brain and the natural connection to the nervous system, as well as everything that is linked with it, the lymphatic system, the endocrine system, all of those processes can actually create necessary chemical releases that changes the cellular structure in the body. That it's not something that you read a book and go, okay, now I'm enlightened. Enlightened doesn't occur through that. It's a biochemical form. And when we have these moments, it's generally through mystical experiences rather than the realization of going to search for enlightenment. Because the first process is searching for enlightenment is always going to be something outside of yourself versus the internal dialogue that occurs. So when we embrace our traumas, when we embrace the shadow, when we embrace the aspects of our lives that might not necessarily be, and this is not just exclusive to that, it can be ecstatic experiences like you all sharing with me today, the amount of joy that I have to share this, even to the point where I don't even have enough time to share more of what this is. This is me still experiencing the emotional body, because I'm elated in this sense. So just I see the time's come up over here, and maybe just one or two questions if it's possible. Just to say that I hope that today was a really Neptunian experience, and my next lecture will actually continue on this, that it's inspired you to feel the necessity of not only integrating this type of consciousness into your life, but also allowing it to metamorphosize yourself in a way that becomes a discipline, you know, emotional connection, emotional literacy. Okay, thank you so much. So I'm going to press the stop screen share over here, and let's see if there's yeah, so like Linda was saying, if there's a potential to one or two questions before we, or maybe, oh, actually I've got 10 minutes left. I was looking at the Zoom calendar, so
yeah, you've
I'll
got
keep
10
quiet.
minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, yes.
Cool.
I just wanted to say, SΥmON, thank you so much for putting all of that into words. It's what a lot of us have been feeling, and thank you for doing a Zoom meeting on this. It is so important. So anyone with any questions, please unmute and go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to Yeah, that was really good, Simon. It brings up a lot of emotions, actually, just talking about all those things, actually. Because when you were talking, I started thinking about deaths that I'd experienced, and then birth, the birth of my son. And yeah, and then of course the emotions come up. And recently, this full moon was a real, it was a real stinker for emotions. With that focal point of Neptune, it was wild. Especially as my moon is at the same degree as the full moon.
Okay.
Yeah, and my ascendant is the same degree as Neptune at the moment. So it was, and I'm an airy person, but I was swamped. Yeah. And so that's interesting what you say, how to work through the emotions, that how to push, keep them moving and not get bogged down is
what I've become aware of through the different things is that it's very healthy to have a friend that you can trust to share these layers of emotion. The natural zodiac answers the question for us. It's a Scorpio archetype, it's a Capricorn archetype, and it's a Pisces archetype. And it's all about how do we acknowledge the deeper emotions that we feel. And so the way to do that is to practice and develop emotional literacy. So emotional literacy is the capacity to take 10 minutes out of your day, preferably at the afternoon or evening, reflect on moon, ninth at night, right? Reflect on in the impressions that you had in the day and how you responded to them, and write down the words. So you felt sadness. And sadness, what was behind the emotion of sadness? Did you disassociate? If you disassociated, why did you disassociate? And the more that we can access and drill down to acknowledging those types of emotions, the more we're going to be able to bring us what is alive within us. And the more that we practice that discipline, the more we actually begin to actually speak from an emotionally literate place. And that allows for acknowledgement of what's real for us, and that's real authenticity. Because when we want to be authentic with ourselves, we want to really acknowledge that, okay, before this meeting started, I had lots of anxiety. I had anxiety because there's a part of me that feels that every single time I have a 10th house Pluto with all that stuff again, I spent a lot of my early life like needing to not prove, but I had a lot of expectations. Pluto in the 10th house Libra, from parents to behave a certain way. And that imprinting still exists with me today, where I have large groups of people that I love to talk with. I mean, this is like, if you ever wanted to know what truly brought me passion, it's this moment right now, sharing this with everybody. But there's still anxiety because will I be accepted? Will it be accepted? Is it too radical? Do I speak like this? Is it too fast? Da, 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 da. The more I identify those emotions, the more I can actually allow for the process of releasing them or acknowledging them or working on them, whatever forms of therapy exist. And of course, supporting the body through certain, food choices, especially, I hope that like answers the question in a way that's not too long.
Yeah. Like reparenting and nurturing yourself, nourishing your emotional
really
body.
Important to reparent. It is one of the most profound things that you can do because of the rate, how it changes the brain's function.
Definitely.
Acknowledgement,
Okay, next question.
I would be happy to jump in if everybody is there. Hello, this is my first time with this group, so thank you for welcoming me. And I just want to say all of this so resonates with me. To find this group of evolutionary astrology has been a wonderful fit for me, even though it's been a short time. And as a midwife for both ends of life, I have seen, both birth and death and the transitions in between, if you will. And when you have spoken about this emotional body, this is where I see much of the transitions occurring with those that I work. Being able to see the soul of a life coming in and a soul leaving us when we are sitting, or I should just speak for myself, when I'm sitting with the experience with those that I'm with and really sit in the middle of my emotional body, it's amazing what occurs. When you had mentioned that transmutation, transformation, and transcendence, when I can go through those phases, the clarity of that ego soul connection, and then the evolution of who is being birthed, who is giving birth, or if they are passing away at the end of life, is incredible. And so much just falls away. I don't know if I'm using the language that
No,
is.
I think that you are really, really expressing this water trine in such a poetic way, and I hope that I'm not, jumping in over there. I just when you finished, I wanted to actually just share a couple of words that you used that were specific to these symbols and how you actually validated it by being so young to you.
Oh, well, thank you. And then just to add, I am in the inner city of Los Angeles. And when I'm not here, I'm in very conflicted areas in the world. And so that adds another container of our shadow, is when I'm in very challenging areas. And so much, again, can be transcended, transmuted, and transformed during that time. So literally, the last part of it, literally what we carry from our familial, from our past lives as an individual or soul, the community collective, all of that literally can be transformed. And
Absolutely.
that is, like you had mentioned, bringing that emotional body right to the center and forefront. And that basically has been the door that I've gone through. And I've stayed away, for the most part, as much as I could from the patriarchy. And leaving my body, it's always been staying in my body. And this is something that I help moms or those that are still in the room giving birth to stay in the body, in the emotional body, and the person that is leaving as well. So just saying that. So thank you.
Cool. Anybody else got some thing to share or questions?
SΥmონ, I have a quick question about the moon's nodes. And so how would we look at the nodes? How would they be helpful in our understanding on how to express the moon?
Okay, so let's see if I can respond to this question from how I understand it. Because we're dealing with the nodes itself and the direct correlation to Pluto and the nature of evolution, right? That's what we're the core of it.
Yes.
Okay. So if we identify the nodes as so South Node would reflect the womb of the past. Okay, if we look at the South Node in our chart, think of it as the womb that contained our desires and what held our security patterns. So naturally, when we come into this life, we have the South Node reflecting to us imprints and impressions of past. So for me, South Node in the 11th house conjunct Jupiter and in Sag, there's a strong association with kind of like intellectualized belief systems that are, that are detached, right, to objectify. And my moon sign sits in Gemini in the 5th, which are, again, both airs. It's an air and a fire sign. There's no water in that. And yet my moon sign, not only because it's conjunct my North Node, brings me to realize that what I shared today in regards to Michaela's question around emotional literacy, like that is actually how my moon sign has given me the capacity to not only step back and objectify my own my emotional impressions of the day, but it also enables me to connect and validate and express those emotions. Because when I grew up in South Africa, and also the parents that had, predominantly my stepdad, I had a deeply, deeply, deeply conditioned patriarchal home. So my emotional body and nervous system is completely shut down when it comes to like trigger patterns. I noticed that anything can just shut down the emotional body. And it's to a point where if you look at my iridology, you'll actually see that there's a marking where the thyroid exists as well as the throat. There is a weak defect in expression of the emotion. It's frozen. And that moon in the 5th house in Leo, in Gemini, Pluto conjunct Mercury as well, even though you hear me today talking in this manner, if I get traumatized by an emotional experience, I go mute. It's like I don't have the capacity. It's almost as if there's a wall between me and the other person. So that that moon sign and how it affects the nodes is it's actually inviting me to ask not only the questions that are able to help me connect with my environment, but it is also there to help me validate what I'm feeling and experiencing, because the patriarchy doesn't want you to do that. It doesn't want you to validate the feminine. It doesn't want you to validate your emotions. Oh, you're feeling emotional? Come on, stop being such a wimp. Those are the types of psychology. So it's almost like the South Node conjunct Jupiter in Aquarius in the 11th house, because I have Uranus on it as well. It's like I need to objectify and liberate myself from those patterns of belief systems that were initially, assimilated from early life, Moon Gemini, and childhood, but also to break away from them and validate and actually communicate and connect as a man what those emotions are. And the more that initiates it, and more I initiate that into my life, the better I'm able to actually access the moon opposed Neptune, as well as Pluto in the 10th house, Saturn in the 10th house Scorpio, which is what I'm doing with you guys today. And I sit here today, and I'm probably the only guy in this conversation here, but I am on a mission. I'm on a mission to share and create as much content as possible that allows the masculine form to come back home. Because the world is not going to change from feminine principle. That's my opinion. I know it's confrontational. As much as you guys are going to be out there trying to be activists, it's not going to change, because the masculine principle needs to come back home and plant flowers, i.e. come back and nurture his own woundedness, his own shame, his own guilt, his own humility. And I struggle with that on a daily basis, because there is a lot of that stuff there, but I'm taking small steps every single day to acknowledge those dynamics. And part of the reason why I'm doing a lot of the healing, like the healing foods, is to actually bring up all of the emotions that have been formed within my body, where there has been anger, where there has been pain, where there has been frustration, where there has been repression that gets, expressed outwardly through my day-to-day existence, so that when they do come up, I can actually acknowledge them and then release them. So like I said again, and to answer your question, Linda, I hope, is that the nodes play out as this old identity structure and how we can make choices that leads to evolution, and the moon cultivates our capacity to feel the change. So for me, my moon sign in the 5th house, the only way I'm going to truly access the healing mechanism that will evolve through the emotional body is not to learn as much possible and to communicate it and just go, okay guys, today I'm going to teach you some esoteric knowledge. It's actually to connect with my own life experiences, and then from those life experiences, because I have an emotional imprint of them, that's why today, when I shared in the beginning, I talked about a personal experience of mine that led me to this point, because to me, that is how I feel. That's where my true passion lies. That's when that Leo Moon Gemini combination really comes out in a way that really connects, versus just, hey, validate me for what I can say. I don't want that. I have a really strong aversion to it. It's like, okay, yeah, I can communicate in a really wonderful way, but that's not, I don't want that attention. I'd like to be able to change people's lives through the expression of empathy in a way that really touches our hearts. And if I can come across in a way that really gives that impression, then I'm fully happy. And so that's how that moon sign really allows the nodes to change and evolve me through the emotional body. Like I actually feel the emotion. The emotion changes our lives, not the intellectualization of it. So long-winded expression, but there it is.
That's a great answer. Fantastic. So we're to really feel it, feel our nodes and the issue, yes, and the archetype. Yeah, excellent. Beautiful. Yeah. So that brings us to the end of your meeting. Thank you so much from all of us, and we will see you next time.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you, SΥmµN.
Thanks, SΥmµN. Great.
Thanks, SΥmµN.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.